She found herself in the cultivation world and underwent a transformation, becoming a defenseless, humiliated, and voiceless girl. In the blink of an eye, she was not only impoverished, but also targeted by assassins. She twitched her nose at the man and thought it was a good thing she had bailed out the villain. The man stood up abruptly, and now the little girl didn't realize who she had saved. It seemed to her that she had helped the real villain. Not only had he refused to hold up his end of the bargain by providing a favor in return for her favor, but he had accused her of something. The king made it clear that he had no intention of recognizing her, and if anyone wanted her dead, he could proceed without hindrance. Men who arouse unpleasant feelings or have antipathy. The mercenary lifted the little girl by the throat and continued to hold her like that. She decided to teach them a lesson. They will watch as the 4-year-old takes her revenge. They would watch her win the villain's heart and climb to the top of the cultivation world. Shouts could be heard in the settlement, urging them to move out of the way, to stay out of the way, as the Heaven sect was looking for someone. A man approached the old man and asked if he had seen this person, showing a picture. He insisted that the old man was telling the truth, but the old man continued to claim that he had not seen anyone. Another sect member discovered a small hut and immediately reported it to his companions. He was puzzled, not understanding how they could even detect anyone in this surprisingly remote place. His comrade ordered him to stop talking and knock on the door, as this was the only place they had not yet searched, and he obeyed that command. A creak was heard from behind the door, and a little girl appeared in front of them. The man was perplexed as to why some little wee one was living here. Then the other asked the girl if she had seen the uncle in the picture. She came closer and looked down from top to bottom carefully. Then she just shook her head in denial. The men made the decision to leave, convinced that the one they were looking for was not there. Just as she approached to close the door, the dog began barking in her direction. The men abruptly rushed into the house and pushed her aside. They had to take a quick look around there. The little girl was outraged by this behavior. How dare he break into her house in the middle of the day? This action showed a complete lack of respect for human rights in this cursed world of cultivation. The man lifted her up by her hair, to which the little girl began to thrash about without making a sound. The man wondered if that demon could have turned into a girl. But noticing that the girl didn't make a sound, she was mute or something. The little girl didn't understand what was wrong with mutes. She wondered if the mutes had eaten his family or what. He should let the mistress go quickly. The second man announced that the temple attendant had requested their presence. There was probably really no one there, so they should leave immediately. They were not thrilled to be so unlucky and sent out to search in such a ruined place. After all, they didn't think that a demon could be lurking there. The little girl just watched them and wished they would leave soon. Such bandits. Her stomach rumbled because she really wanted to eat, and she couldn't understand how other people who traveled through time could use a trainer, a program to change game settings. She had become a mute runt, but there was nothing she could do about it. The little girl eagerly dreams of returning home to enjoy a cup of tea with milk, delicious pudding, and a large portion of chicken, as well as a plate of flavorful pork stew. Unexpectedly for her, her act led to a lot of problems. When she opened the box, a great demon was inside. She felt vaguely perplexed as to why the demon was exactly there in the crate and what had prompted her to step in to save people. After she tugged at its nose, it suddenly opened its eyes. The little girl pensively reflected that it was at this very moment, through this act, which in this world was of great importance, it was as if she had uncovered some secrets. It suddenly dawned on her that the man she had tried so hard to save turned out to be a true great demon. He stood up, and at that time the little girl fell uncontrollably, as if she had lost consciousness. She was seized with such fear and anxiety that she could not hold back her tears. The little girl panicked, wondering if this man intended to kill the witness. In a cultivation world where humans and demons live side by side, Tianxi, the protagonist, witnessed the destruction of his clan as a result of a war between demons, which also severed his soul ties. Determined to take revenge, he joined the celestial sect, striving to destroy every demon and following the path of righteousness. But as Tianxi grew stronger to fulfill his revenge, new challenges arose. The girl, who was immersed in reading a book, suddenly erupted with rage upon learning that Tianxi's fate had reduced him to nothingness. Her anger became so intense that she could not continue reading any further. Even though she was confident in her strength and abilities, she realized that she was capable of handling many things. However, despite her confidence and ability to act, she was unwilling to interfere in the course of history and rewrite it to her liking. Moreover, she turned into an ordinary girl from the street. Having neither the art of words nor the skills of fighting, she found herself in a difficult situation when she was about to be killed. The little girl came to the decision that it was necessary to come up with something. After all, she was the one who saved him. She started waving her arms for the man to stop. She wondered if he realized his gravity. He lay disconsolately on the riverbank, covered in blood. It had taken her a lot of time and effort to drag him there. All the while, the little girl tried to convey to him that without her help, he would have frozen to death. This suddenly amused the man to the point where he smiled widely. His smile caused the little girl's joyful excitement. The Demon King expressed surprise, noting that he had never seen such lively movements before. He then asked her if she was trying to placate him or something, considering she was such a funny girl. He kept laughing, but the little girl couldn't tell if he was laughing at her or something else. This made the girl very angry. She thought that he shouldn't think like he had privileges just because he was handsome. She was very angry, but wished he would pull himself together. The man continued to laugh so loudly that his wound began to bleed again. She couldn't figure out who told him he could move, considering it could cause the wound to open. The man asked who she was and where her parents were. The little girl only turned her head. Not in this book, her parents. She brought more water to soak the wound. The king asked about her not being able to speak and then asked more about if she wanted to go with him. She touched his wound gently but a little harder, causing him to feel a sensation of pain. The little girl, feeling unsure, silently apologized in her thoughts. This was her first experience dressing such a complicated wound, and she was feeling a bit anxious. Suddenly he noticed that his wound had begun to heal rapidly, causing him to feel surprised and bewildered. He couldn't believe his eyes, realizing what was happening and how the girl had managed it. The little girl, watching his reaction, couldn't understand why he was so excited. The thought arose in her mind that he might be a masochist, which explained his strange behavior and surprise at her actions. The Demon King urged her to stay where she was and not move. The little girl, frightened by his words, couldn't understand what he was going to do. After all, she was just a child in an unexpected and scary situation. Suddenly, a dangerous moment flew by as an arrow flashed through the air as it passed by them. Reacting instantly, he instantly covered the girl to protect her from possibly being struck by the arrow and prevent her from getting hurt. The men through the door turned to ask if the man in question was still dead. This sudden and harsh reminder of death shook the little girl, causing her great fear and anxiety. Only a few seconds passed and suddenly the house exploded, shattering into splinters. They managed to land at a safe distance, escaping the threat of destruction and danger. The king appealed to the girl not to leave and to behave herself. This unexpected appeal made her stop and turn her attention to him. At this time, she could not believe that her house had exploded, which caused her shock and anxiety. She was curious to solve the mystery of his identity, who he was, and why so many people were after him. Various assumptions and hypotheses hovered in her mind, but she felt that the answer to this question would be able to reveal many mysteries and riddles to her. In an instant, a sword whistled and landed right beside her, making her flinch in surprise and fear. The formidable proximity of the dangerous weapon caused her to feel threatened and tense. When the mercenary came face to face with the Demon King, it instantly dawned on him that the Lord was right. Regardless of what the demon might have been in the past, it now seemed merely small and insignificant. He pointed his sword directly at the king and said that he could kill him with one hand. He had nothing to fear. The king invited him to try, and then asked if he would teach him his techniques. The little girl, unable to hear their conversation, was curious as to what they might be talking about. She stood back, watching their gestures and facial expressions carefully, trying to figure out what was going on, but unable to hear their words. The mercenary, making a determined gesture, interrupted the conversation with words, urging the king to stop talking nonsense and die. He waved his sword, pointing it directly at the king, showing his determination and readiness for action. Suddenly, as they both looked forward, what they saw stunned them to the core. The king, watching in amazement, wondered if the mercenary could do anything more than just stick his sword in. If that's all the mercenary could do, the king was sure he wouldn't be able to kill him. But the mercenary was uneasy, as he didn't understand how the king was still standing on his feet since the sword had already pierced him. He ordered everyone to attack. The little girl watching the battle was anxious and worried, fearing for the king's life. She worried that he might die if he continued to fight any further. The king asked a question, wondering who exactly had been sent against him. Perhaps they had mistaken the identity, or perhaps it was an indication that people had become useless and insignificant nowadays, as his name was probably not mentioned in the historical records. The little girl thought about what an unpleasant type he was. He pretended to be great, and continued to annoy them even when they had already beaten him severely. The mercenary grabbed the little girl by the throat so tightly that she almost lost her breath. It was incomprehensible to her how this mercenary dared to attack her. He warned the king to show no more cunning and obey, preparing to accept his death without resistance, otherwise he would break this girl's neck. In response, the king said that the mercenary could do as he pleased, as he was completely indifferent to who this girl was. He could kill her as it was of no importance to him. The little girl was shocked at what was happening. After all, she had risked her life to save him, and this is how he responds to her. She couldn't believe he was treating her this way after all she had done. And then she began to flicker fire. The mercenary was deeply amazed at what was happening. His amazement was so intense that he couldn't hide it. The little girl realized how her kindness had been repaid like this. It made her determined to teach the king a lesson. The mercenary began as if on fire, and he let the little girl go. They were confused. Where did this little girl come from, and what kind of fire was out there? None of them could understand what was going on or how she was glowing with fire. The man was at a loss. It was incomprehensible to him why it was impossible to put out the fire that had engulfed him. He begged for help, not knowing how to get rid of this incomprehensible situation. The king smiled, his mind pierced by a hunch. She was the little girl who had been lighting up his fire for a few moments now. After a while, the little girl didn't understand what had happened or why she couldn't move. The mercenaries kept saying she needed to be finished off, and that was it. The little girl felt a deep sense of bewilderment. Would she be able to be reborn again after what had happened? Vague doubts lingered in her heart, and thoughts swirled restlessly in her head, leaving her in a confused state. The little girl slowly opened her eyes, her gaze falling on the figure approaching her. As the figure came closer, it appeared to be a king. He pronounced that he had changed his mind. The king had finally found a man who could kill him. With a slight note of approval, he stroked the girl's head and noticed that she had potential. He suggested that she join the demonic cult and promised her training under his guidance. He affectionately lifted her face and gently asked her to remember that his name was Chun-Jo. However, before the little girl could catch on, fatigue and sleep deprivation from the recent events took over and she fell into a deep sleep. Some time passed, and the man turned to the master, asking him if it was time to begin. The master, in turn, noted the strangeness of the situation and expressed the opinion that the girl probably represented some mysterious element. He also remarked that Chun-Jo had probably taken the matter very seriously. Even if Master Yao had more assistance, they still wouldn't be able to handle such a task. These words awakened her. On this day, she felt an unusual strength within her that could defeat the great demon Chun-Jo. When she finally came to her senses and gathered her thoughts, Chun turned to her, asking if she was awake yet. The little girl began to feel that this was already too much. She realized that the king had no understanding of what she was experiencing. The little girl continued to sleep in the great demon king's arms. Her little body seemed tiny in comparison to the king's mighty arms, and yet she felt protected under his care, even despite his sinister status. The master bowed his head in respect for his excellency and expressed regret that for many days the king had been in danger, but they, his subordinates, had been unable to assist him in his time of need. Chunzhou reassured them, saying that everything was all right, and ordered them to stand up. He then inquired about Zhao Jun's condition. The master politely addressed his excellency, assuring him that there was no need to worry or care since he and Wuda had already dealt with the traitor. He urged his excellency to rest and recover from his ordeal. Chunzhou replied with pleasure, saying that excellent. They could now depart, and upon arrival he would be sure to reward them well for their service. The master offered to take care of the girl, expressing his care and attention to her well-being. The king responded by saying that there was no need, and then lifted the girl in his arms. This action of the king may have expressed his care and desire to protect her, even if she was not immediately mutually happy about it. He reported with some playfulness that the girl was his new toy. This expression could have reflected his desire to control and manipulate her, treating her as a kind of tool or object that he could do with as he pleased. In the novel, the main protagonist Tianxi's life was completely shattered when he became embroiled in a battle with a demonic cult. His spiritual connections were severed, and these wounds would not heal, robbing him of his ability to continue fighting. He felt hopeless until he made the decision to join the Tianzhao cult. He made this decision in order to improve his fighting skills and achieve the ability to avenge what happened. Later, after some time, he met Ye Ming, a beautiful girl whose essence possessed divine power. Years later, when the Tianzhao cult gathered hundreds of thousands of followers to eradicate the demonic threat, Tianxi, having finally retaliated, was able to carry out his revenge. Ye Ming used her divine power to defeat the great demon Chunzhou, thus preventing the demonic cult from being able to re-establish itself. After the war ended, the higher-ups became jealous of Ye Ming's power and decided to eliminate her. When Tianxi, who was wandering around the continent, heard about this, he immediately returned. Taking advantage of his authority and influence, he rebelled against the Tianzhao cult that threatened Ye Ming in order to protect the honor and memory of his dead friend. Ah Yun turned to the little girl and asked if she was having nightmares, as he noticed that she was shivering fearfully and constantly waving her arms. To which Aju replied that the little girl was constantly poking at her, and it was really annoying her. She explained that this behavior could wake up the girl, and it's unpleasant. The baby, in turn, did not realize who exactly was poking her so unpleasantly. As soon as the little girl opened her eyes, she saw the two girls in front of her. Yuju didn't miss the opportunity to say how cute the little girl was. However, Ayun noticed that the little girl had finally woken up after all. Their appearances scared the little girl a lot, and she thought that the two girls in front of her were ghosts. The girls started to argue about which one of them had scared the little girl. And Yun remarked to Ju not to look at her with her red eyes, which she thought had scared the girl. Ju in turn replied that it was Ah Yun's long tongue that scared her. Yun apologized to the girl and explained that only she and Ju were capable of taking on human form. She then asked if they had scared her. The little girl thought about how unbelievable it was that she was suddenly in a demonic cult, whether in the north or the west, but in the end, home is always better for her. She misses her old cabin a lot. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and Chunzhou's bodyguard, Chen Yin, entered the room. He informed her that His Excellency wished to see the girl, so they should quickly prepare her for this meeting. This scared the hell out of her. The main hall of the demonic cult was a majestic space filled with mysterious darkness and a mysterious atmosphere. As she passed by the demons, she could feel their gazes, but she didn't understand why they were looking at her so strangely. Their eyes were full of incomprehensible emotions, from curiosity to hostility, from amazement to contempt. These gazes filled her soul with anxiety, and she wondered painfully what could have caused such a reaction in beings from another world. In the depths of the hall, on a high throne, stood the Demon King. His entire posture radiated authority and power, and his every gesture was stern and commanding. It was a nightmare incarnate, ruling over all the forces of darkness and chaos. Chun Ying turned to His Excellency. He reported that he had brought and captured the people that His Excellency had requested to be delivered. The little girl was startled to notice that it was the same creep. The Demon King, towering over his subordinates, ordered without any hesitation to bring these men to him. These were the people who had begged the little girl for help, for they were her parents. Their faces were haggard and frightened, and their eyes mirrored fear and despair. She couldn't believe her eyes. The people who claimed to be her parents were standing in front of her. Mixed feelings filled her heart: fear, doubt. Chun Zhou, with pride and authority, said that there was no need to doubt that it was her real parents standing in front of her. His words sounded like a confident promise filled with firmness and faith. Her father and mother addressed her as their daughter, and argued that her high position should enable her to plead with the chapter for mercy and their release. They tried to use their parental bond with her to convince her to help them get out of their confinement. Sarcasm. When a girl was born, they abandoned her, feeling disappointed and dissatisfied. They believed that a boy was born, which could have brought them more respect and prosperity. Instead of caring for her, they dropped the infant off to beggars, leaving her to fend for herself. When the little girl was brought before the Demon King, he asked, with mockery and contempt, if she needed such parents who could only take care of her until she brought them satisfaction and benefit. Desperately defending his position, her father insisted that they, as parents, had given her life, and even if they would have abandoned her when she was still in the womb, they had no other choice. He tried to justify his ruthless behavior by implying that they were forced to make a difficult decision at that moment. The king threw the dagger at the little girl's feet, urging her to reflect on what had happened. The gesture was clearly meant to make her realize the importance of the decisions she was making and their implications for her own life and future. The little girl, feeling the weight of the responsibility and impact of this moment, slowly picked up the dagger from the floor. Chun Zhou, with eyes full of anticipation, turned to the little girl, asking her what she intended to do in this situation. The tension in the air was palpable, and in that tense moment, one of the little girl's strands of hair snapped and slowly hit the floor. The little girl, with a sense of determination and strength, picked up the scissors again and cut off another strand of hair. Her movements were determined, and her eyes expressed confidence and fortitude. She was ready to prove that she was not to be underestimated. If these people standing in front of her were actually her parents, then they didn't deserve to be recognized by her. That was the thought that flashed through her mind like a spark of outrage. When the king turned to ask her what she had to say or anything else, he did so with a slight mocking tone. Then he chuckled and added that although she was young, she had a strong character, which was a remarkable quality. He made his decision. The little girl was clearly qualified to become the king's apprentice. She showed worthy qualities that made her a suitable candidate for training. Devil Cult Elder Wu Yao asked His Excellency to wait and explained that this girl contained divine power. He cannot make her his disciple. Yao held out a sword to the king and explained that the deceased head carried this sword, and then asked the Lord if he had forgotten who killed him. It was done by people with divine power. It was hard for the girl to realize that she had divine power within her. The elder continued to express his fears, claiming that the society would be against their blood enemy would become the king's apprentice. He continued to offer the sword and persuaded the king to avenge his dead predecessor. The elder insisted that Chun Zhou should take the sword and use it to kill the girl. Gradually, everyone present began to agree with the Devil Cult Elder's statements. They supported his request to the king to avenge the murdered cult head. The master added that even the two major clans of their cult, Qing Li and Wu Yao, were urging the head to make a fair judgment and kill this girl. This emphasized the seriousness of the situation and the agreement of many parties that action was necessary. Under the ever-increasing pressure from those present demanding that the king kill the girl, the situation became even more tense. The noise and voices of demand became louder and more insistent. All of this had a serious effect on the little girl, who could not withstand such pressure and probably felt affected and confused in front of such a situation. Chun-jo, perhaps sensing the unfairness of the situation and realizing that the little girl was in a difficult position because of the decision she had made, approached her. He hugged her, which may have been an attempt to comfort her or express support. He then ordered everyone present to be silent, which was an act of authority and a call for respect. The king, furious at the actions of his subjects, decided to impose a severe curse of silence on them. This curse stipulated that none of the subjects could utter a word or a sound. He expressed his indignation, claiming that their behavior resembled something out of a stable, where pigs grouse and howl without stopping. Grumpy idiots, as he called them, carried on their arguments and conflicts with no regard for decency or respect. The little girl standing next to the king reflected on his action. She reflected on how cruel and ruthless he was, not wanting to listen to them, but simply deciding to put a curse of silence on them. This action of the king may have seemed unfair and cruel to her, but in a way she felt some satisfaction from it. Great! He then instructed Chun Ying to keep an eye on them, expressing his desire for someone closer and more familiar with them to provide oversight and control over their actions. Turning to the little girl, the king spoke words of going to a more secluded place with her. When Chun Ying noticed that some of those present wanted to say something in response to the head's order, he turned to them to clarify the situation. He explained to them that their head had instructed them to think about their behavior. The little girl was puzzled when she suddenly felt it become cold around her. She couldn't understand why this was happening. However, when she finally opened her eyes, she was amazed at what she saw. There was snow everywhere. This sudden change in weather and surroundings left her bewildered and surprised. As the girl scrutinized the surrounding snowy terrain, her gaze happened to fall on a tombstone. This discovery stood out against the white snow and caught her attention. They came closer to her, and the king ordered her to serve him tea. The girl obeyed the king's order and began to serve him tea. Her many thoughts and questions jumbled in her mind. She couldn't help but wonder why she, who was small and nobody special, had been chosen by him. Perhaps she assumed it was because she had recently saved him from danger or performed some other act of courage that had caught his attention. Chun-jo expressed his desire that she should pay her respects and bow. Obediently following his instruction, she performed this action, showing her respect for him. He addressed her with words full of respect and importance, saying that despite her youth or lack of experience, she should address him with the title Master. In this way, he emphasized his authoritative position and demanded respectful treatment. The king sat her on his lap and began to gather her hair. The little girl kept thinking that trying to understand what a man was thinking was a waste of time. At times, she didn't understand what was on his mind at all. Chun-jo began to use magic and said that from this day forward, she would renounce the world and renounce her past life. She is reborn and officially becomes his disciple. As her master, he grants her a new name. Her name is now Ye Ming. She was getting used to her new name. Wu Yao towered over the table, and the subordinates in his presence were deprived of the opportunity to express their opinions. Chun-jo had originally not planned to discuss his actions with them. If Qing Lie's men were to assist them, they would be able to kill her without difficulty. However, they chose to remain on the sidelines as they watched their companions die. In the end, Qing Lie could pose as the chapter's protector and take all the glory for himself. The devil cult elder, overwhelmed with anger, suddenly slapped the table, expressing his indignation. His subordinates had been watching the actions of the head secretly in that village. He had remained in the shadows for a long time and behaved mysteriously, and now he had suddenly returned. Qing Lie does not allow the thought of eliminating Chun-jo. He believes that the head can no longer be trusted. He appears to him as a cunning fox. As soon as the little girl returned to the palace, she was greeted by Ju, who was happily waving her hands in greeting, and Yun. Ju immediately exclaimed joyfully, informing them that she had finally returned, and that they had heard about the incident in the main hall that made her the first apprentice of the Lord. And Yun was apparently very concerned that she didn't know the way back, as she had been expected for a long time. So she asked her friend to be quiet so as not to draw too much attention to their conversation. Yun offered to help the little girl with dressing, thoughtfully offering her help. To this, Ju asked if she was feeling hungry, considering she had just recovered and hadn't eaten anything, and she was being sent straight to practice. Ye Ming felt affected by those words and staggered, perhaps from fatigue or emotional tension. In an instant, when everything seemed to be fine, she suddenly collapsed. The next day, Ye Ming kept trying. She realized that although she had divine power, it didn't mean that she had already learned how to use it effectively. After Ye Ming had defeated the head of the demons, the war between the Heaven Sect and the demonic cult had come to an end. However, the elders of the Heaven Sect were afraid of the divine power Ye Ming possessed and decided that she had no place in their world. She was now faced with the choice of being killed by the Heaven Sect elders or perishing from the constant bullying from the Demon King. No matter what choice she would ultimately make, Ye Ming's fate would remain inevitable. Because she wasn't doing well, she accidentally hit the rock. Chen Ying, noticing this, asked what was going on, and then added that Master had brought her here to train her in martial arts, so she should not harm herself. He had the skill of a master in reading emotions, which allowed him to accurately assess other people's feelings. Ming pondered that it might be worth giving up something. However, Chen Ying immediately replied that no, that was not an option. Chen asked if she could see the blade that was almost at the top of the cliff and ordered her to climb up there and pull it out. Min was shocked. She just couldn't believe her ears. "This is ridiculous! Is he really seriously suggesting that a 4-year-old child climb a mountain?" She felt her eyebrows rise in bewilderment. Would he also suggest that he take his phone and videotape the whole thing? But that would be absurd, she wondered. Maybe she could do it. But before she could even finish the thought, Chen Ying had already expressed his answer. No, she can't. Suddenly, her pondering was interrupted, as if by a scrap of thread, and she was brought back to reality by Chen Ying's answer. Sis Luo Luo appeared and informed her that what a beautiful sight awaited them, for at first they had thought to go down the mountain and take a walk, but they saw that the first Chen of the Lord was about to take out an indestructible 1,000-year-old blade from the stone. The monster turned to Luo Luo's sister with disbelief on his face. He asked her if she was joking or what. How would such a little girl be able to pull out the blade? His words were filled with doubt and skepticism, for the idea seemed absurd. Luo Luo asked them to ignore his words. First apprentice, she addressed Ming and explained that they could wait until she was strong enough. In fact, Luo Luo thought what an arrogant girl. 50 years she had been trying to pull out that blade. When that one fails, everyone will immediately realize how worthless she really is. Only Luo Luo is worthy to take the place of the first disciple. God, Luo Luo is so arrogant. Chen Ying said that they were Qing Li's disciples and advised the little girl to ignore them and go on with her business. Ming was puzzled. They seemed to think that she was deaf, or what? After all, she had never once asked Chun Zhou to take her as an apprentice. The little girl concentrated on gripping the hilt of the blade and tried to pull it out of the stone with persistence. The fire of determination burned in her eyes, and her fingers gripped the blade tightly, despite its heaviness and resistance. She did not give up, stubbornly continuing her attempts, relying on her strength and perseverance. Qing Li's disciples kept laughing at her. They told her to get down and go back home after all. She still had milk on her lips. Chen thought that ever since the Lord had stuck the 1,000-year blade in, no one had been able to pull it out. Chen Ying, carefully observing the situation, concluded that the little girl was not yet strong enough for this challenge. Suddenly, a loud clap of thunder rang out in the silence. Lightning lit up the sky, and then something shattered with a loud crack. With a powerful effort and perseverance that was beyond question, Min was finally able to pull that unshakable blade out of its stony darkness. The power that resided within her became evident as the blade, once submerged in invisible solid stone, was now in her hands. She struggled to catch it as she began to pitch. Her arms swiftly stretched forward as she tried to grasp the blade that was slowly but surely sliding in her direction. Back then, while she was still on the cliff and hearing all the things Qing Li's disciples were telling her, she decided to calmly handle her task without paying attention to them. She, as Ye Ming, could not admit her defeat. Through the air came the sound of rustling stones that began to tumble down the mountain below. At this moment, the little girl, along with them, flew downwards like a bird. Everything happened so fast that there wasn't even time to react. Ye Ming felt time slowing down the moment the rocks began to tumble off the cliff, carrying her down. She realized that death might be close at hand, but suddenly, as if out of nowhere, someone strongly and gently embraced her, as if an invisible guardian angel had intervened to save her from falling. It was Chunzhou who reported, then apparently the guys were having a lot of fun. He looked at the people gathered around and could not hide his bewilderment. There was a slight irony in his voice as he asked why he wasn't invited. Chen Ying asked for the Lord's forgiveness for his behavior. He would accept any punishment. The king said that he had sensed a strange change in the magic barrier and had come to take a look, no more, and then asked who was responsible for it. He turned to Ye Ming and inquired that she was the one who pulled him out, didn't she? Ye Ming suddenly appeared in front of him, and a blade gleamed in her hands. He couldn't tear his gaze away from this unexpected and exciting picture. Her confident stance and determined gaze added to the impression of a small but strong girl who held a powerful weapon in her hands. He stroked her head with the words that indeed, this is his student. Luo Luo was seething with rage. Luo Luo did not understand how this was possible. Not only could she pull out a 1,000-year-old blade, but she was able to handle such a wind and not drop it. The king announced that the blade was now hers. He lifted her into his arms. With confidence in his voice, he asked her to remember that she was the best. His words sounded like comfort and encouragement. No need to listen to what others say. So, having made a decision, they slowly headed towards the exit. At this time, Luo Luo, feeling hurt and disappointed, suddenly lost her balance and fell to the floor. Her determination only strengthened as she lay there, looking forward with perseverance and tenacity. She had promised herself that all was not yet lost, and she was going to prove what she was capable of. Ah Yun looked after the little girl, letting her know that she was so very tired, and Zhu replied that she didn't think Chen Yin was fit to be anything but a bodyguard. She didn't understand what kind of child could even endure such exhausting training, because now she resembled a black-faced god. In Chinese history, the faces of statues are depicted in red, black, or gold. Red is the skin color of mortals, golden it means enlightenment, black is the face of a sufferer. Yun replied that she had just seen them return with the master. He seems to like her a lot. Tang Ying congratulated the master that this girl is actually incredibly talented. Late at night, Zhu said that she was so sleepy. The girl turned to her friend and suggested that she should go to bed. But Ah Yun, though physically present, seemed to be preoccupied with her thoughts, distracted or immersed in her own thoughts. Her gaze was staring off into the distance, as if she was seeing something beyond the space they were in. A few minutes after Ah Zhu rushed to escape, her sight was startling. She was covered in blood. She realized that she needed to immediately inform the master of something important related to Ah Yun. However, before she could run far enough away from where Ah Yun was, the latter caught up with her. At this time, Ye Ming was in a deep sleep, and her face expressed calmness and peace. In her dream, the names of Chunzhou and Tianxi were whispered, as if they were inextricably linked to her subconscious. Her voice was faint, but distinct as she uttered their names. Ye Ming rolled over on her bed, trying to find a comfortable position. Her sleep was disturbing, and she felt that something was bothering her, keeping her awake. At some point she woke up, realizing that she would not be able to go back to sleep. Her thoughts swirled around in her head like puffs of smoke, tangling and intertwining with each other. So much had happened in the past few days that her mind was a jumble of thoughts, and she realized she couldn't sleep. The war between the cults. By the will of the heavens, the demon king Chunzhou was killed by divine power, and the demonic cult was wiped out. Ye Ming wondered what kind of power had brought her there and what it wanted her to do. The Heaven sect relied on Ye Ming's divine power, but even the elders of the sect were afraid of her, causing Ye Ming to suffer, causing the protagonist of Tianxi's book to lose his close friend. In the book, Ye Ming and Tianxi only met in the Heaven sect. However, Ye Ming is her, and she joined Chunzhou and the demonic cult. The story began to change. In the story, Tianxi was expelled from the demonic cult when he was 6 years old. It turns out that she appeared there before that happened, which means there's still time. Since the plot can be changed, maybe the little girl can prevent the tragedy in the book. She got out of bed, put on her shoes, and wanted to go out. The most important thing for her for now is to find Tianxi and prevent the war between the demonic cult and the Heaven sect from starting. That way she could save everyone. When Ye Ming approached the door to go out, Ah Yun met her. Her face expressed curiosity and some concern. She turned to Ye Ming to ask where she was going. She took her hand and led her in an unknown direction, explaining that when they passed this bamboo grove, they would be in the library. She asked if the Lord would give her something, for he had ordered her to come. The little girl thought that she was planning to go look for Tianxi, but apparently it wasn't a good time yet. Ye Ming couldn't help but notice that Ah Yun was behaving unusually. There was something mysterious and elusive in her behavior, like a secret hidden behind a mask of ordinariness. Maybe it was something in her gaze or movements that caught Ye Ming's attention, making her suspect that something was wrong. This moment left a trace of mystery and disbelief in her mind. Like a wizard dissolving into thin air, Ah Yun's image disappeared in the blink of an eye, just like the smoke that melted into the air. Only a few seconds passed, and all that was left in front of Ye Ming was the void where her familiar had just been. This moment left an aftertaste of mystery and bewilderment, making her wonder what had actually happened. Suddenly, as if out of nowhere, a portal appeared, a vortex that began to slowly form in the air. At first glance, it was something inexplicable and mysterious, as if a gateway to another dimension had opened right in front of her eyes. The little girl stood there, feeling the gravitational force of the portal begin to pull her in, like an invisible hand pulling her inevitably into the depths of the mysterious passage. The little girl couldn't help but notice how something like a screen suddenly appeared in the air and began to show scenes from her memories. It was like magic. The memories came to life before her eyes, as if she was immersed in her own past. There, Ye Ming ran to Xiao Yao and happily showed a steamed cake. She said that she had begged half of it and offered Xiao Yao to eat it together. The little girl was astonished and couldn't believe that the Ye Ming she saw on the screen could speak words and utter phrases. To her, it was something absurd and unbelievable, as if some parallel world was opening up where anything was possible. She felt her mind struggling with this unexpected reality, trying to realize and accept what was happening. She had always thought of them as best friends. Xiao Yao thanked Ye Ming and added that she herself hadn't eaten anything yet. There was complete silence around the little girl. She realized that she had no food or parents, but at this moment, while she was feeling this emptiness and loneliness, Xiao Yao was beside her. She was there, ready to support, comfort, and help. It was like a ray of hope in a moment of darkness, like a light at the end of the tunnel. Xiao Yao made her feel that she wasn't alone, that there was someone who cared about her and would be there for her in difficult moments. Ye Ming abruptly recalled this moment from the book. If forcibly unwound painfully, it could harm his sanity and soul. A broken heart. Recall. Xiao Yao sat sick in a cold house. Ye Ming came running to her and told her that she had just met a fortune teller who told her that she was born in the year, month, and day of Yin. In the future, she would have great fortune. The sickly Xiao Yao smiled faintly and confirmed that this would be the case, as if confirming her decision or promise. Her voice was quiet but resolute, and her gaze was filled with seriousness and humility before the inevitable. Then, expressing interest, she asked what happened next, showing a keen interest in the fate and events that might follow their conversation. Ye Ming handed her the medicine and went on to say that after he left, a married couple approached her and offered to go with them. Maybe they could leave this place. That couple indicated that they wanted to shelter her. Xiao Yao noticed the shadow of that couple. The little girl kept saying happily that the fortune teller's words were Pavda. That day became really happy. But she wants Xiao to go with them, so they came with her. They will become one family. That couple informed. Then they live in a neighboring village right by the mountain. They have a few acres of fields. They must have heard about their Li Liu Liu family. They offered them to come with them. Xiao Yao asked them to wait. She informed them that he would only shelter her. Ye Ming would not go. Xiao went on to say that they shouldn't take Ye Ming with them because she is sure she wants to kill her father and mother. They were born with her on the same day and she's also a Devoka, so there's no need for the couple to take the two of them. Min was flabbergasted. Those times father had said what a good girl she was. One would be enough for them. She felt a great disappointment as she realized that she was wrong. After all, she thought they were friends. Ye Ming tried to shatter that mirror of memories with her blade. Otherwise, the events of the past would break Ye Ming's heart again and breed inner demons. She swung and struck that mirror sharply. It only knocked the little girl back. She didn't make it. Flashback. Ye Ming was sitting under the window and heard a conversation that in the neighboring village lives Li Liu and his wife. They are so old, many years trying to conceive a child, constantly praying to different gods, all to no avail. But one soothsayer taught them a secret technique. He said in order for a boy to be born, a girl born on the day, month, and year of yin must be sacrificed. It was a nightmare, as it is a forbidden technique. They found such a baby girl a couple of days ago. They were joyfully returning home with the little stray. At this moment, Ye Ming realized everything. She was rushing through the crowded streets, feeling the wind rushing past, and her heart was pounding frantically in her chest. Her voice resounded through the narrow streets, calling out to Xiao Yao. Her every exclamation was filled with desperation and hope that her friend would hear her and come to her rescue. It was raining and Ming kept searching for her friend. She asked her to answer where she was. Now the little girl thought it was all her fault. She mentally asked Xiao Yao for forgiveness. She asked to go home sooner. Suddenly, a sudden burst of excitement swept through the crowd. A group of people around started shouting and waving their hands, pointing in some direction. These cries pierced the air, and the words, "The temple is on fire!" spread through the streets, causing panic and chaos. People began running in different directions, eager to get away from the danger, and fear overshadowed the normal flow of everyday life. The hearth of the fire became the center of attention and caused continuous excitement among the crowd. They were asking for help, for a little girl had just gone in there. She was inside. They tried to extinguish the fire faster. Ye Ming felt a force of panic and fear take over her body as she approached the burning temple. She saw the flames devouring the ancient shrine, and her heart clenched in pain. With a heavy heart and worried thoughts, she fell to her knees before the crumbling building, as if appealing to a higher power for forgiveness. Her pleas were filled with fear and remorse, and her tears mingled with the smoke rising from the fire. Tears flowed from Ye Ming's eyes as a flood of pain and understanding. She realized that Xiao Yao probably wanted to protect her from something dangerous or unpleasant, and this thought only intensified her grief. The moment the realization pierced her heart, she couldn't hold back her emotions and burst into tears. Her tears were a manifestation of mixed feelings: grief for what had happened, gratitude for his care and protection, and helplessness in the face of what had happened. This moment was an ordeal for her that drew a flood of emotions out of her. Her tears fell onto the blade, but suddenly a flower began to sprout from the blade, from which sprouted the noble spirit of Sword Yu in the form of a kitty cat. Ming was amazed and stunned to see that the spirit kitty had emerged from the sword. This was something unbelievable and unexplainable to her. She couldn't believe her eyes when she saw him just floating in the air like a weightless cloud or a ghost from a fairy tale. The little girl wondered what that thing was, to which Yui replied for her to show a modicum of respect, for Yui was not a thing to her, but a noble sword spirit. Ming inquired that he could hear her thoughts or what, to which Yu replied that of course he could. The little girl hugged him so tightly, for how wonderful it was that she could finally talk to someone. Yu ordered her to stop crying and blowing snot already. They don't have much time. The most important thing for now is to get out of there. Min thought that she had failed to break the mirror with that wooden sword, to which Yu hit her with it. The noble spirit asked if she had paid attention to the back of the mirror. Mirrors of mental anguish is a thing that destroys human relationships. On the flip side, this mirror shows reality. Two little girls whose lives have never been easy. Taya Ming probably still lives somewhere deep in her heart. That's why she's in so much pain so far. From now on, she will join hands with that Ye Ming for Xiao Yao's sake, and by all means, she will continue to live. With a single movement, the little girl hit the mirror, which ended up shattering. The little girl was lying in the middle of some room. As some person approached her, she felt the tension slowly building up in her body. At this moment, Yu, her faithful companion and protector in the guise of a cat, began to show signs of unease. His growl sounded menacing and threatening, as if warning her that he was ready to protect her in case of danger. It was Ah Yun, and she picked the girl up and asked where she had been, for she had finally found her. Min recognized her sister and mentally replied that it was great that she was okay. The little girl kept waving her arms and mentally saying that she had just felt a strange, magical field there. Sis asked if she had broken that field or what. The noble spirit asked Min to come to her senses, for that tongue-tied one was not herself. Sister Yun put her hands on the little girl's face and said that she was not really Ye Ming. Yun was attacked by Yui, whom Sis Yun threw back. She didn't understand where the noisy dog came from. Min was very scared for little Yu, and Yun turned to the little girl and asked how a person could wake up so quickly from such painful memories. It was only possible if she had lost her memory, or it just wasn't her memories. She squeezed the little girl's hand harder. She wondered who she was, for Min was not just a 4-year-old child. A couple seconds and the blade flew straight into Yun's sister's hand and she let the little girl go. Min orders Yui to come back. She also wants to know who he is, how he dared to take over Ah Yun's sister's body. Ah Yun ordered Min to stop. After all, she is a little mute girl who can't even say her question out loud. Suddenly the candles went out, and a wave of magic hit Sis Yun. She kept telling Min to stop hiding and should come out, because Sis Yun would find her anyway. Chunzhou addressed the little girl with a soft but insistent tone, asking her to be quieter. His words were like a caressing touch, filled with care and attention to her condition. As soon as he covered her mouth, Yui rushed to bite his hand to keep him from touching the little girl. The Demon King started to shove that spirit back into the blade. After all, it was too noisy, so he should go back and rest there. You didn't understand how such a lowly Demon King dares to treat a divine relic like that. Chunzhou informed him that although he didn't understand what he was muttering there, he was sure it was nasty about him. The little girl tried to hold on to the blade. Yu begged him to let it go because it would eat that king. Min asked him to be quiet. He's such a good boy. It was only because of him that she was able to get out of the mirror of mental anguish. Yu replied to her that at least she understands that. The king only turned to Chun Ying, and the latter understood him perfectly. Min noticed how beautiful it became. She could not believe that snowflakes were falling, and was already reaching out her hands to them. Chunzhou asked her not to touch them, and then asked her if she wanted to die. He asked her to be careful and stay close to him. Everything started to freeze in the library, and Yun didn't understand why it got so cold there. Chunzhou, who was behind Yun, informed her that it was forbidden to light up in the library. This made her shudder, and the candle fell to the floor. The king caught Yun's leg that she was about to hit him with, and said that Yun had never injured her leg. Now I see. The invading soul is incompatible with the body and starts destroying it. She messed up his library and kidnapped his precious student. He reasoned that Yun might not think she could get out of there alive. Chunjo noticed that her mental shell had a masculine energy. He couldn't believe that she was possessed by a male spirit. The king asked who he was. Yoon directed her energy towards the little girl. That spirit left the library in the form of a bright red beam that was directed into the unknown. Tang Ying reported that that spirit dared to escape, and then asked if he should go chase after it. To which Chunjo replied that his cultivation level was quite high, and he had left no trace, so Tang would not be able to catch up with him. He should not waste his strength. The little girl wondered why little sister Ah Yun was still unconscious, and if she would be all right. The king explained that if the soul voluntarily left the body, he is not in danger. The injured parts of the body will also recover in time. Min didn't think the demon king could be so nice. Chunjo lifted the baby girl on his shoulders and turned to Tang Ying and asked him to carry Ah Yun to her room, and he would put the baby girl to sleep. Min couldn't believe that he was going to put her to bed. The king explained that she was very frightened, so he would put her to bed with him to make her feel better. Otherwise, she would wet the bed and become a laughingstock. The little girl started to be his pens and kept thinking she was all grown up and didn't wet the bed, so he should take that back. The Demon King is not cute at all. He's a brute and a jerk. The little girl's reaction really cheered up the king. He informed her that she is just a baby and she shouldn't be so ashamed of it. Master will put her to bed. Tan didn't realize that the head was really going to tuck her in or what. Already in the room after a couple of minutes, Min did not realize that he called it putting to bed. He just passed out first. She didn't realize she was serving as his pillow or something. Min thought that if she had known in advance that this was going to happen, she would have eaten tofu, which is made from beans that legends say repel demons with their pungent odor. She didn't understand why she was even doing what he was saying. After all, her main goal was to find Tian Shi as soon as possible. The little girl fell asleep with her arm around Chunjo's shoulder. He opened his eyes and looked at the little girl. He wondered what her soul wanted. In the afternoon, the little girl woke up first. The book she had read didn't tell her much about the Demon King. Now she sees the vast difference between how evil he was described in the book and how he really is. She still doesn't know what Ye Ming was thinking when she killed him. The little girl mentally turned to the Lord as it was already noon and asked if he would be having lunch. The king asked her to be quiet. He held her close to him and told her that it was still early morning, so she should go to bed. He opened his eyes and saw Min holding a pillow over her head in full alertness. He asked her why she wanted to hit her precious master. That pillow flew into him after all. The little girl didn't understand what early morning he was talking about, for it was worth it to open her eyes and see that the sun had long since risen. He said he was getting up and asked her not to hit him. Mournfully, the snowflakes fall in late winter, and the winter plum withers on the 1,000-year-old mountain. The little girl sat covered in snow. Chunjo asked the little girl why she wanted to play in the snow, if she wanted to call her enemies and play snowballs or what. The little girl couldn't understand if he was making fun of her or what. It was too much for her. The king asked her if she wanted to go to the library and there study how the winter plum wilts on the 1,000-year-old mountain. The little girl thought. Sure, he didn't seem to want to teach her spells, even for self-defense. The withering of the winter plum on the 1,000-year-old mountain. One move and something seemed to work for her. Min couldn't understand what had just happened. Chunjo noticed how cute she was and kept thinking that maybe her spiritual power wasn't stable enough due to her age. He didn't understand how she could be motivated. Snowflakes were flying, a cold wind was blowing, and the little girl started sneezing. He came closer to her, put a cape over her, and asked her to dress warmer for training as she might get sick, and then added that if she couldn't practice, she might not come. Min turned to the master and thought there was something human about this asshole. Chun informed her that he had something for her. The king held out a hairpin to her, his gift as her master. The hairpin is the key to the library. He carefully put it on Min and explained that it was very important, so she should always wear it. The little girl touched that gift from the master and thought that she didn't even call him her master. It was already late in the evening. Yu informed her that she was still too young and had little spiritual power, so her blows weren't strong enough. This kid doesn't know what he's teaching. He asked her to take a break since she was tired or she would still fall off her feet. Min didn't understand why she wasn't succeeding. She was trying so hard. Yu asked if she could hear him at all or what. Suddenly, the little girl heard a conversation asking what he was looking for, so again. Only the noble spirit wanted to say something as Min covered his mouth and asked him to be quieter. She thought that voice sounded so familiar, and as soon as she saw who was standing there, she realized that that voice was Luo Luo, and she was bullying the other students again. That guy replied that it was his and asked to take it back. Luo Luo asked him how he could prove that it was his and if he was not ashamed to lie so brazenly because she had found it. The guy the little girl noticed was Tianxi, the main character. The little girl started to walk backwards and accidentally stepped on a twig, which rattled. Luo Luo asked who was there and ordered to come out quickly and directed a ring of magic towards the little girl. She already wanted to meet it, but suddenly that ring was knocked back by Tianxi and asked her to get down as it was too dangerous. Luo Luo pointed her finger at the little girl and asked that it was her again. Tianxi asked the little girl that she was His Excellency's new disciple. Ming didn't understand what was wrong with him and why the protagonist looked so unhappy. Luo Luo took the chain and reported that one of them ruined her party and the other damaged her weapons. She said that they wouldn't get away with it and pointed the magic chain at them. The little girl didn't understand if the rope with the golden bell was in the original story and how it got there. At the same time, Tianxi was scolding himself for being distracted. Luo Luo ordered him not to fidget since it was already dark, that it would be easy to lose this thing, and then asked if he would blame her if it broke. The more they twitch, the tighter the chain gets. It's so unpleasant. Min asked the spirit grandpa to save her. Well, they'll have to rely on you. The noble spirit said that this guy has such extraordinary strength. In an instant, that chain was broken. Ming wondered if it was true that in the original story, he had only gained his aura after joining the Heaven sect, and if there was strength in his body, since he could use his spiritual energy without help. As you would expect from the main character, his power is limitless. Luo Luo was very much surprised by this, and asked if he wasn't a member of their demonic cult, and why he was practicing the Tao Immortal path. The monster asked why they wouldn't just bail since they got what they wanted. Luo Luo grabbed the little girl and asked what he would say now, that he wasn't as brave as he used to be, and didn't give a damn about this girl's life. She thought that as long as the longevity lock was in her hands, then he wouldn't make a move. Tianxi thought that although he wanted to get the castle back, he wouldn't dare to disregard her life. He must think of something. The little girl mentally asked not to worry about her, and ordered the sword spirit to return. She didn't understand, how dare she bully the protagonist? Luo Luo made a big mistake, so she should prepare to die. Yu couldn't believe that now he had to work night shifts too. That bunch of students didn't understand what they were waiting for, because there were 4 of them, and only 2 of them. They began to advance. Min fended off the blows and thought that it was not for nothing that she had been practicing so hard all day instead of resting. She would be strong enough to handle 2 at once on her own. Tian was amazed at what he saw. He would never have guessed that such a small and seemingly fragile girl had skills in martial arts. Luo Luo sat in her seat, her face reflecting a state of confusion and discontentment. Her eyes expressed some loss and incomprehension, and her posture was relaxed but filled with anxiety. Various scenarios and questions could be swirling in her thoughts, without finding answers to them. She felt lost. Once Ming and Tian had gotten through, they pointed their weapons at Luo Luo and ordered her to hand over that thing.